So in the last study club, we covered the overview of bureaucracy and civilization, the purpose and scope of the article, the origin and early forms, the rise of centralized administrations in civilizations, and we looked at the three different ruling classes that I talked about. We had the default or the traditional ruling classes, which were the priest, the warrior, and the merchant. You had the next transitional, which were the nomad and the peasantry, and you had the emergent, which were the secret police and the hybrid. So today we are going to discuss the bureaucracy and the social decay, the transformation of institutions, basically how they went from these three classes to being really, co-opted by the bureaucracy. We will look at the rise of consumerism and the last man, which is a concept from Friedrich Nietzsche's The Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Then we'll look at the theoretical perspectives on societal decay, the social parasite theory, and the foxes and lion theory. We'll look at this first, then we'll look at this later, and if we have time, we'll cover these sections, which is basically the cypherpunk movement, your freedom tech, Bitcoin, and a lot of other things, right? So let's go over it. Uh, Yeah. So hello everyone. Let's start with this. I am Neo, host for today, and written this article. It's a research article that is still going on. All and every criticisms and changes are welcome. So yeah, let's go over it. So lions and foxes. So Will talked about the sources of power, right? Which were you can subvert your ideology with force and deceit, money with information, and pander to the emotions of the masses with manipulation, right? So under conditions of anarchy, all the money in the world will not help you. If you're in a room with another person and you have $1 million while he has a gun, all your money will not give you an ounce of power in all likelihood. He will exit that room leaving you without a single one of your million. Information, ideology, and money are sources of political power that are dependent on there being some level of civilization, because in a state of anarchy, there is only one inexhaustible source of political power, and that, of course, is pure violence. In contrast, in our civil societies, violence is used reluctantly and as a last resort in the form of the police and the army. But 99% of cases where political power is exercised, such as collecting taxes or granting permits, it is done without the need of use of direct violence. So, we need to say that the more orderly and, for a lack of better word, civilized a society is, the less that direct violence matters and more the information, ideology, and money matters. So you can look at this today as well. You like if you are in Sudan or like some DRC Congo, violence is more prevalent there. Violence lets you speak more than your money there, right? But if you are in Bombay, right, during Bala Sahib's time, right, he was like, okay, we'll remove Gujaratis and stuff. But Gujaratis now own Ghatkopar and all. So you cannot do anything to them, right? So information, money matters today a lot more, right, for more civilized places. So if you want to know where power comes from, we need to know what type of society we are looking at. If we are looking at Sudan, who is in the middle of a civil war between two warlords, we can say that power grows out of the barrel of the gun. While in our calmer societies, forming an armed militia will not get you any political power, but instead will alienate you and lead eventually to a standoff with the police. That is why something like the Overton window, right, where the left went from a place of being hippies to now shaping the entire institutional landscape of America, right? It needs to be studied. It is something that Bitcoiners need to replicate. Uh, I've not written it here because it's a bit extreme, but yeah, that's the crux of this paragraph. This actually correlates quite closely with one of the main ideas of the father of political science himself, Machiavelli. Niccolo Machiavelli stated that there are two types of rulers, the foxes and the lions. The lions get their power from violence alone, while the foxes get their power from intrigue and politics. In war-torn Sudan, the foxes are practically useless. That is the land of lions, while in our calmer societies, the opposite is the cause. A lion is hopelessly outmatched in a bureaucratic structures against the foxes. Okay, we could even say that all civilizations experienced a change from a ruling class made out of lion that forged a nation in some war of independence or conquest to one made of foxes that then take over once once that this society grows and establishes itself. Okay, we will see the examples of how this has happened for all of the types of for all of the types of the ruling classes, right? So now let's see how bureaucracy supplants the ruling classes themselves, right? You might have known, okay, how did India went from like a priest class where you had a very fluid caste system, right, to a place where you had a lot of you had really codified caste system, right? Or how did India went from a place where they had kala pani, which basically would get, which would basically strip you of your uh, social hierarchy or your caste if you try to leave mainland India. Okay, how did you evolve from that? So bureaucracy thrives under ideological rule because it formalizes power. The intellectual class, whether priests, scholars, or technocrats, technocrat is a different concept, but it's a very interesting concept. Needs an administrative machine to implement their vision. Without bureaucracy, their influence remains abstract. Ideas alone cannot enforce laws, collect taxes, or regulate behavior. Institutional religious institutions like the Catholic Church or Confucian civil society systems show how intellectual elites use bureaucracy to extended power control. However, bureaucracy is not loyal to ideology. It serves the system, not the ideals. Over time, it shifts from being a tool of the intellectual class to becoming a self sustaining entity. The priestly class may set the initial doctrine, but soon the bureaucrats are the one deciding how that doctrine is interpreted, applied, and enforced. Eventually, this leads to institutional ossification, where maintaining bureaucratic procedures become more important than the ideological mission itself. Example, a very good example, the late medieval Catholic Church, where theological disputes became secondary to the maintenance of its sprawling administrative network, right? So when you had the late medieval period and the Catholic Church, where you had the Renaissance and the whole Catholic versus Protestant coming up. In modern terminology, the Catholic Church was more, you know, involved in whitewashing and sort of damage controlling the narrative that had, become prevalent due to the protesting being able to, read the Bible for the first time in local languages, the people being able to understand it from their own. Before that, only the priests had the ordain or the mandate to do that because they only knew the high Latin words. Okay, so that's a good example. Next, you have the warrior nobility, where the warrior nobility from command to collapse. Military rulers initially see bureaucracy as a necessity, a way to maintain supply lines, enforce orders, and regulate conquer territories. But over time, bureaucracy neuters the warrior class. Yes, it really like neuters them. Neuters in the sense just yeah. So warrior operates on instinct, decision making, and immediate actions. Bureaucracy, by contrast, slows everything down with layers of approval, regulations, and administrative oversight. The warrior class, once the apex of power, find itself tangled in a system where control is increasingly in the hands of clerks, advisors, and administrators. In many historical cases, military elites are gradually displaced by bureaucrats who controls logistics, governance, and taxation. The sword rules at first, but the pen outlasts it. A good example, the transition from feudal society samurai rule in Japan to the bureaucratic Tokugawa shogunate, where samurai became glorified government officials rather than warrior. This was also the time when Portuguese and all of these other foreign influences reached Japan, and Japan was a very conservative society. They think of these Portuguese and they thought, oh my God, these people, bringing their guns and stuff. We don't want it. We just want to live in our, conservative society. But then they get shot, right? Basically, you imagine the samurais running towards these Dutch and Portuguese guys, and they were just getting shot. Okay, and that was a wake up call for Japan to change something. Okay, so that happened. So yeah, two sections covered. Any questions, any discussions?
Yeah, I think I just had a rambling or thought to share. So I think in the current context of, like, for example, how Donald Trump is influencing major tariff policies, and he's doing it mainly through like soft power, right? Because he's gained power through democratic procedures. And yes, I mean, we might see some trickle down effects of Bitcoin policy. Like he built a executive order, signed a executive order on strategic Bitcoin reserve, on all societies because America has influence on basically the entire world. So I think it's like the example of calmer society influencing even the most violent societies, which yeah, it's interesting dynamic. It will play out just in front of our eyes. It's like living through one of the most important passages of history
Yeah.
right in front of our eyes, and nobody knows how it will pan out. But I think yeah, it's more likely to be like optimistic in my personal opinion because Bitcoin is like pervasive, right? Because it's an economic movement first. It's not a political movement. Nobody is like there is no ideology of Bitcoin, right? People are using it because it's adding value to their life. So it's more
Hmm.
pervasive that now there is more political momentum behind it. And I look at it from a skeptical lens. I still believe separation of money and state is the principle behind Bitcoin. But it's I want to be optimistic that Donald Trump and his policies can push this momentum of Bitcoin to the entire world.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. We discussed this ahead, like you made a good point. Yes, one of the big things that Bitcoin and things like Nostr uh, and Tor does is they basically bureaucratize and remove like the control of information, right? A big thing that is happening in India right now as we speak is the telecom bill, okay? And that basically gives the bureaucracy, the bureaucratic class a huge power when it comes to information, right? They can basically kill any dissenting voice who streams or like does anything they don't like, which is crazy to me, right? It's like as if the control they have is not enough. So yeah, true. Um, One more thing, just a second, Tushar. One more thing, guys. Uh, I am not able to, do both of the. I cannot see the chat because I'm only able to share my entire screen for some reason. So just like if you want to ask, you can just open your mic. It's cool, right? Yeah, go on, Tushar.
Okay, so I have like this idea, or let's just say an observation that bureaucracy in India is like both an inherited system from like not only Indian caste system, but like British colonialism. Like I think India had a hint of bureaucracy even before like colonialism, and like after colonialism hit, now we have like a
Yeah,
mixture of both the things. Like let me like completely like in if we take in comparison like democratic uh, movement in Greek, like an ancient in ancient Greek, like the democratic movement when there were like Caesars and all this Democrats, like that was a very different system that what we have like the Indian bureaucracy. Right now, it's like a very fucked up space. So, what is your like thought on that? Like, how would you compare both of those things? Because I,
yeah,
as an idealist, I
hmm,
like the Greek democratic Caesar system more than what we
yeah.
have here.
So, so I will rephrase your question first, so like people can. Basically, what you're asking is, uh, did the British rule bring a certain level of bureaucracy to the existing systems, including caste system, or like was it there something like this, right? So I
Yes,
think yeah,
something like
definitely.
on the
But
same
so I will go. Yeah, so I will go purely by the facts. You other guys can. I'll give my opinion, but like going purely by facts because it's a very sensitive topic for people. Um, it's in written, documented that before British, when it came to the state, the caste system was not codified. Okay, there was no big central state like that codified the rules like the British did. British came and they basically made policies and rules according to each caste. They were the first to do consensus based on the caste, right? They did that, then they divided resources, which basically codified the caste inside the bureaucracy. Now bureaucracy, as we all know, are very inflexible, right? Caste consensus can change, right? With over time they change, but the policies reflecting that, the legislation that happens requires a lot more time to change. Okay, so out of that you had a lot of things that came up. Then you looked at, okay, these are the section of people, these are the amount of people, and the opportunities is not being, being distributed nicely and stuff. So you need to make rules on that. You need to codify it more, and instead of leaving the matters on the society to sort itself out, and that's the more natural way. Yes, there might be more friction, But societies and cultures, when they interact with each other, right, they tend to solve the problems by themselves. We have done that throughout the history, right, throughout the history. So the society, so the state came in and they basically said, I'm the arbiter of change, I will do everything, you just sit back and follow as I say. And that has not worked out for us, as we all can see. Baba Sahib Ambedkar said put a certain cap or put a certain time limit on reservation, but that was not removed. They say, people say that it, the injustices are not societally, there is still, casteism, and to some extent there is, but to what extent does that justify a lot of other things, or to what extent, like, so you have to measure everything. But the problem is, it's a cultural and a social topic. And the problem with cultural and social topics is you cannot tangibly measure them. You can only feel them. They are a product of individual expressions and experiences. How do you tangibly count it and put it into bureaucracy, codify it? That is the issue. Okay, so yeah, that is my opinion. And some, like the first was a pretext or the preference. So yeah, what do other guys think?
Yeah, I think I'll just like to chime in quickly. I think, yeah, it's a sensitive subject, as you mentioned, and it's like an expression of individuals' experiences. There is no like one formula for like solving societal problems. And I just bringing a Bitcoin lens to it. I think the like I'm being repetitive perhaps, but yeah, let's say economic movement first. And just because it's a borderless global network, I think what's most powerful about it is that it's adding value directly to individuals' lives beyond religious or cultural or whatever identities. So it's like bringing people together just by this persuasive power of like being able to store value and send it across the planet. So like it's already for me, it's like at least in my personal life, it's like crossed all chasm. I don't engage in most of the cultural discussions. I engage in cultural discussions on like lived experiences of the individual, not like their identities. So it's like already so pervasive, and I think it's like going to spread more across the world because people are going to realize the value of like Bitcoin firsthand by number
Hmm.
going up first, and like it just shreds through all the other conversations because yeah, money being politically connected like brings all sorts of dimensions to it. But when you have a money which just adds value to you because of its scarcity and like permissionless
Yeah.
open work, then it just like shreds through every other yeah, like limited identity that people have. So like it brings meritocracy to a world where like it's so divided.
Hmm. Yeah, and you can move and you can build that meritocracy away from the existing systems. That's more. That's very important because um, you can tear down the existing systems, but that will cause a lot of friction because there clearly are some sections or some part of society which benefits and the other part which do not benefit. So just breaking down the system, it's I feel it's directly just, people who say just like end the government, just direct it very, it will take like a lot of things to get there. Like Alok is here. His name is Apalok. He shared a very interesting thought that you would need a calamity or like a very big thing of sort to break the existing system, right? So in essence, Bitcoin is better, but because with Bitcoin you can build a parallel system. But again, the problem then is when you build a parallel system, you are taking away from the existing system, right? When you choose to participate in a Nostr or a Bitcoin network, you are moving away from the existing system. And the bureaucrats or the existing, whatever the centralized state is, they don't want that to happen, right? So, yeah, okay. Anyway, let's.
Like a last quick plug and a very controversial take. This is from this is derived from conversations with Saurabh, Shreyan, and like multiple discussions with both of them. It's like for the Indian adoption as well as the, I would say, adoption for from the bureaucratic government in India. Like if Bitcoin and Bitcoiners were to be classified and reserved as a caste in India, then and as a vote bank, then it would take such a boom. Like the adoption will take such a boom. Like once the government of India would recognize Bitcoiner as a caste. So yeah, that would be a very fun and like a social experiment kind of thing. It's like Why like create a parallel system if you can like give in into the system and like say that this is our union, this is our small 10 lakh people. Maybe 10 lakh is a very big number. We don't have that right now in India, but like just for a change, like a social experiment, I think that would work
Yeah,
flawlessly in India.
And I think the most
makes sense.
interesting thing is that it is already there. I think caste is a loaded word, so it's like I personally want to avoid that word, but it's like just for my own personal sanity. But I think it's already there.
Like a class
Bitcoiner
of
is
people.
becoming a word, right? Bitcoiner. People say that, hey, I am a Bitcoiner.
Mhm.
People ask like, where are the Bitcoiners in Mumbai or Hyderabad or whatever, right? It's like people ask like the question, is he a Bitcoiner? Is he not a Bitcoiner? Like it's already getting ingrained in the human culture. It's not there in India because India is such a nascent stage of.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, if we have the numbers, and if we have, I would say two things. If we have the numbers, and if we have a propensity for violence, which is I want to discuss ahead, later on, um, in the Overton article. Yeah, definitely, this can happen. The vision that you guys can, and that can definitely happen. But it's just that like you need a propensity for violence, and I will talk about it later. Anyway, let's move on. Okay. The merchant class, the corporate bureaucratic state. The bureaucracy and the merchant class have a love hate relationship. On one hand, the bureaucracy facilitates trade by providing regulations, contracts, and stability. On the other, excessive bureaucracy stifles the free market, creating artificial barriers and inefficiencies. By the way, this for this whole paragraph, if you guys want to know more, just text Apalok here, or you guys can text Sachin, right? They will they will clear these things out like anything. In modern times, we see a fusion, the corporate bureaucracy. Mega corporations now function as private bureaucracies, creating internal systems that are just as rigged and parasitic as state systems. Business leaders may rise to power, but their companies become entrenched bureaucratic machines, slow, bloated, and resistant to change. Ironically, the merchant class often thinks it controls bureaucracy using lobbyists, regulations, and legal loopholes in its advantage. But in the long run, bureaucracy survives long with after individual businesses collapse or market shifts. So a bit of take on it, example, the East India Company, which began as a merchant venture but evolved into a quasi government with its own bureaucratic empire. If anyone plays games, right? There is a game where the name of the villain is Armstrong, Iron Armstrong, and what happens is that a private government, private military, PMCs, like Russia has, takes over the world, takes over the UN, because in year 2040, 2060 or something, all the nations have outsourced their military to these things, and they basically take over the entire world, right? And someone has made a fantastic video, like I guess it's Game Theory by MacPat, Game Theory, Film Theory. So they made a fantastic video basically outlining that in a capitalist world, it's very expensive for corporations to do what governments do, because what governments do is inherently very expensive. There is a very good reason why India has an entrenched bureaucracy, but India has a lot more corruption at a lower level, while in, for example, the West, there is a lot more corruption at a much higher level. A big reason for this is bureaucracy is very expensive. You need a lot of resources as a pretense or as a prerequisite for a loader bureaucracy to exist. Even in China, the China, you have a very loaded bureaucracy which have millions and millions of dollars of gold just sitting in their homes, right? That is why Xi Jinping goes and literally culls and kidnaps his political enemies, right? Whoever he fits, because it's very easy to make them your enemies because all of them are so loaded, right? Uh, what happens is the bureaucratic state, is a very different kind of beast. The merchants who think they can control it is a very different kind of people, right? You have companies, you have rich people saying that they can control it, they can control things, but the bureaucrats can launch one investigation, can launch one thing. They can put them into the loophole of tax fraud or something, and that's it. It's all over, literally, right? That is why you have guys like Mukesh Ambani, Adani, right, who people say they are in the uh, you know Modi is in the pockets of Adani and Ambani. But if you look at the history, Ambani and Adani traditionally have very good relationships with both Congress and BJP to make sure that all of their interest, regardless of who is in power, are served. Right? So that's something that even I guess a lot of smart rich people recognize. That is why they fund things from both the sides. Right? Yeah. So any thoughts? Apalok is writing, so yeah, cool. Any thoughts? Any guys' thoughts?
Yeah, just one quick question. I think the hidden police aspect of like administration, was it covered in the last session? I can't recall because yeah, just
Yeah, it
when you
was.
were
It's
mentioning.
going to come. It's going to come here as well. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah, because when you were mentioning the like the Indian system, I think it's more like the hidden police, right? It's like the overt power
Yeah.
influences more because it's like everybody's like like for the lack of a better
Yes.
expression, like bought up. It's like everybody's already bought. There's like a much deeper like influence than just the politicians that we see on television.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I've covered it, and there's a very good reason for it. Uh, with the modern surveillance state, so if Huxley is the guy who wrote Brave New World. Brave New World is a very famous book. If you guys not have read it, you should, right? So George Orwell and Huxley were two guys who gave two versions of dystopias. You had 1984 and you had Huxley's Brave New World. Okay, so in Brave New World, he says that the people would be controlled and they would rightfully give in to the servitude. If he was alive today, he would be horrified. We have a surveillance state, we have a device in our hand that the government can watch us and have all access to our entire life 24/7 with just like a 5-inch screen. Huxley would be horrified if he looked at it. And people don't care. People don't care about the privacy. People don't care. So because of these tools, because of these, existing technologies and the ever expanding bureaucracy. Because remember, right, the bureaucratic empires like EU, India, the American deep state, they have no mechanism to reduce themselves. They can only expand. They can only expand. Okay. So that is why you see that everything is culminating to the same thing. Every state, every other state in the world, right, is coming to that secret police one that I was talking about. Okay. And there is a very good reason for it. Right. So, yeah. So bureaucracy and the transition. So after this, I'll cover this quickly and then we'll go to the emergent classes, which Shreyan was talking about. Here it is, right? Um, the bureaucracy and the transitional ruling classes. The nomad elites, the enemy of bureaucracy. So a very interesting like one, I feel. Nomadic elites thrive in conditions where bureaucracy has collapsed or is weak, or they just come and just end it, right? They operate through flexibility, improvisation, and informal networks rather than rigid administrative systems. This makes them fundamentally opposed to bureaucratic expansion. However, if a nomadic elite successfully seizes power, it must either build a bureaucracy or be replaced by ones. So, the Mongols, for example, and Saurabh and Shreyan, you guys talked about it in the last session, I guess. The Mongols, for example, initially ruled through raw military force, but over time they adopted Chinese and Persian bureaucratic structures to govern their empires. Good example, the Mongols eventually converted to Islam because the people were simply not ready to give in unless and until the rulers were Muslims, right? So they became Muslims. But over time, they adopted Chinese and Persian bureaucratic structures to govern their empire. The result, the Mongols were absorbed into the very civilization they conquered, right? Same thing happened with Ahoms. Ahoms, Rajputs came as tribes. They're not Hindus, right? They came and they were absorbed into the Hindu fold, right? Albeit with their own like substructures of, their cultures, their honor, their whatever, the warrior culture that was also, like inoculated into the Hindu fold, but the priest class came at the top anyway, right? This is the fate of all nomadic elites. If they don't destroy bureaucracy, bureaucracy domesticates them. Example, the Mongol Empire, which went from an agile war machine, which conquered the entirety of Russia, China, Iran, burned the most advanced civilization in the huge amazing city of Baghdad, which went from an agile war machine to a bureaucratic ruling system that resembled the state it conquered. Next, we have the peasantry, bureaucracy as the new aristocracy. Peasant revolts and popular uprisings rarely destroy bureaucracy. Instead, they often replace one bureaucratic elite with another. So this is very obvious to us. We are Bitcoiners. We know we have to wake up the plebs and the sheeps, because just them, they will just hand over power from one elite to another elite. As Bitcoiners, we know it very amazingly, right? But this article is like thoda inclusive. Uh, Instead, they often replace one bureaucratic elite with another. Communist revolutions, for instance, claim to represent the working class, but the moment they seize power, they must create bureaucratic institutions to manage the economy, redistribute resources, and enforce party structure. Right? The result: a new class of bureaucrat emerge, replacing the old aristocracy with a new administrative elite. This is why peasant-led revolutions rarely led to two true classless societies. The state expands its bureaucratic apparatus, creating layers of managers, administrators, and enforcers who gradually become the new ruling class. Example: the Soviet Union, where a supposed dictatorship of the proletariat became a bloated, inefficient bureaucratic state. So there's an amazing take by a Bosnian Muslim, which I know personally. He's a guy I've talked with. This guy, he's pretty religious, but he talks about the Bolshevik rule and how even in the Bolshevik rule, even in the supposed, equal world, they used to give and sanction houses. The houses were like, state property, and they're supposed to sanction houses to people equally in the Soviet Union, but they would not. The institutional class would get bigger houses, would get bigger quotas compared to the peasants and the proletariat, what they called, right? So I'll link the guy's video here somewhere, right? Good video. His name is what? Monarchist guy. Okay, I'll link it here later. Bureaucracy and the emergent ruling classes. So yeah, the secret police, bureaucracy as surveillance. The secret police represents a hyper bureaucratic form of power, one that emerges surveillance, record keeping, and administrative control. Instead of directly ruling, they manage power through data, intelligence, and control mechanisms. As you can see, every fucking thing, right? कुछ बचा ही नहीं. Totalitarian regime often rely on bureaucratic surveillance system rather than direct violence. Why? Because bureaucracy allows for invisible control, monitoring, regulating, and suppressing dissent before it manifests as rebellion. This is the final evolution of bureaucratic power, rule through information rather than brute force. Example, also to add on this, right? Basically, you have in America, you have like a level of the the FANG companies who regulate the social media in cahoots with this bureaucracy. They are, even if we are fervent capitalists as Bitcoiners, they are. That's a fact, right? Example: the East German Stasi, which built a vast bureaucratic network to spy on citizens, controlling state without open open repression. So this talks about the partition of Germany after World War II into the Western and Eastern blocks, where you had instant like uh, introduction of the police, the secret police, and how they would spy on citizens, because like you had the Berlin Wall, people were trying to cross it, people were trying to do all kind of stuff, but they had to somehow control their society to an extreme extent. Why so? Because they could literally see with their own eyes the development of the Western Bloc from their own eyes, just separated by a small wall. So imagine the work that the spies, the KGB put in, right, back then. The hybrid. Bureaucracy is the decadence of a good system. So we talked about the hybrid. According to me, it's one of the systems. It's the systems why West is so ahead compared to the rest of the world, right? This hybrid system and how bureaucracy has basically, poisoned the entire well. Modern states and corporations are no longer ruled by individuals but by institutional processes. Politicians come and go, CEOs rise and fall, but the bureaucratic machines remain. It's a self replicating, self sustaining, and the largely immune traditional forms of overthrow. Okay, what I've written here. In a sense, bureaucracy transcends of ruling classes. It's the final parasite, outlasting kings, generals, priests, merchants. It does not need a face, a name, or an ideology. It simply expands, consumes, and perpetuates itself. Example, the modern administrative state, where elected officials often have less power than unelected bureaucratic institutions that dictate policy. So there's a word for it, the tyranny of the unelected, right? We are seeing this every damn day. You are from the US, you are from the EU, you are from India, you are from any damn closely developed nation, you can see it in front of you, right? These two things, the emergent ruling classes, is where our world is coming through. And as sad as it is, it's the worst form of bureaucracy that we can have, right? So, yeah, thoughts, guys, so far. Am I going too fast? Am I like speaking too like fast or something?
I
Um,
mean, just sharing my feedback. I've been like on and off in the session. I couldn't attend the previous one entirely. So I'll once probably
yeah,
go through the entire article that you've written from top to
yeah.
bottom and absorb it and then probably give my feedback and my inputs. As of now, I'm just listening to what you're saying and observing and trying to, kind of fix the dots. So no feedback from mine as of now. I'm just here to listen and observe so that when I go back and read the article, I can recall all what you've shared during the session.
Yeah, it's fine, it's fine. To like give a bit of rundown on hybrid, so hybrid is basically like hybrid is a system where you have competition of everything, right? You have the merchants, you have the kings, you have the warrior nobility, and you have the peasants all trying to vying for the power. Now, it may seem destructive, but that is how Europe used to function, right? And there was constant, on and off. Like, so in a capitalist system, when you have different type of people and individuals and corporations trying to compete with each other, you get the best possible service or product for the end user. Why? So because they have an incentive to make the best thing so the other person can buy it, right? So the entire thing, the function of the government or the state is to sell you ideas, right? The people who want to rule you, they are selling you some ideas. Okay, you give me your power, you give me your word that I have the power, and I will give you something in back. So they are selling you ideas, right? So in a hybrid system, what used to happen was everyone used to sell you the ideas, and so there was a constant competition. Okay, who will give the best things to the end user, which is the plebs. Okay, that is how the West, you know, had like the most development. And the Islamic world in the 13th century was also like this. The Rome was also like this. The India in its golden age was also like this. And the West, in its like 80, 30 years or 40 years of peace, whatever, right, was also like this. There was a constant fight or competition between different classes who all wanted who wanted you to give them power, right? So everyone became richer because of that, right? Yeah. So that is the rundown of how hybrid, and obviously as you can like hear me, it's my favorite system of how things have worked so far, right? It has worked somewhat, but we can never get at because that system has basically sort of fucked itself as bureaucracy became stronger and stronger. Yeah,
Right. Thanks for sharing that.
yeah.
I just had
We
one thing to
also
share.
have so yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I was just sharing that I think you mentioned it that the technocratic like become hugely relevant. I think everybody feels its effects on social media, and I think they are also like in the business of selling ideas, right? So like when you like scroll through Twitter or YouTube, you see after a certain point the algorithm will profile you as a personality and like bombard you with the content that they think they can manipulate your mind with, and it takes like some level of self-awareness and then determination to not fall into that trap. It's like I've like personally also like been through that experience recently where I've like become so self-aware that this is what the algorithm is doing to me that I was like disgusts me. Like the
Hmm.
algorithm is actively manipulating my mind, and I have fallen for it over and over. I tripped for it over and over again, and just realizing that they are in the business of selling ideas. That algorithm is profiling me in a certain way and bombarding certain kind of content towards me, so that I think a certain way. I fall to my biases. I do not question what's being thrown at me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Makes sense, 100%. Yeah, that is so basically you have the corporate elites who also have the most money, now also have the power to shape your ideology and like your control your feed. So they can control basically control information. That's crazy, right? That has never happened. So yeah,
Yeah. And I think we
you
will
can see
see
that,
this.
right? With the yeah, yeah, go on.
Yeah, just one point. I think we will
Go
see
on,
this
Krishna.
at the most embellic extreme with like Donald Trump being the political head and Elon Musk being the technocratic head with Doge now, the Department of Communication.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
can't get
So
like
a
it
lot
can't
of
get more
conservative
extremes.
guys.
Like Elon Musk, the most like the most defining engineer of this generation, and Donald Trump, the most yeah exaggerated politician ever.
What a group of
Definitely.
two people. Uh, yeah, just like what I have written on the screen, just like going on that is
Yeah.
like we live in an Orwellian nightmare, like with all the surveillance and everything in your PAN card linked with everything, your bank. Like
What is admins? What's
admins were like
admins?
people from admin, like people that created advertisement in the 1960s. Like those were like
Okay.
a top people at corporations that created our whole lifestyle. Like everything that we do today is like from comes from a document that was written in like from 1960s to like to 80s. Last it was like
Oh yeah.
I would think perfected in the 80s, and like they created our lifestyle. Like this is what the world will follow in the next decade or so. So like everything,
Yeah.
yeah, the thing, yeah,
Yeah.
Marlboro and
So
like other,
to
yeah,
like okay, so very interesting like thing. Have you watched I think you have watched this documentary, the last thing that you have said, right? Even smoking a cig is giving into
yeah.
consumerism. Yeah, it is. I have a section on consumerism, okay? Oh my God, the rant is crazy, okay? And
Yeah, go ahead, go
have
ahead.
you watched that have you guys watched that um, documentary on how Marlboro basically made an advertisement to pander to the masculinity of men, right? Created advertisements to pander to the masculinity of men and basically, sell more. And the guy who did that was considered the father of propaganda in the US, right? Crazy, crazy, like thing. And like my article touches on that to a few extent because I hate the hyper consumerist culture, and that is also part of the reason why I don't like shitcoiners, because shitcoiners more than no coiners represent that gambling and hyper consumerist lifestyle. Might sound offensive, but I guess most of the guys here are bitcoiners, so like you might understand me, right? If you have been, we are all crypto bros, right? Like we know a friend, we know someone who is working in crypto, who is working outside of bitcoin. Solana is pretty big right now with tvl and stuff. So we know these guys, and we know how, like these people, like the vibe is different. It's more consume, 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 consume. And I guess that's like the worst part of the fiat you could take. The very good thing about Bitcoin is Bitcoiners especially, they want a lot more control in their lives. Okay, so by default, they don't fall in this whole trap of hyper consumerism, because the more consumerist you are, the more you give in to the control you are, obviously, right? So that's pretty cool about bitcoiners, I feel. I've touched on this in the article as well, but yeah, I had to talk it out because like crazy, like I just remembered the whole Marlboro thing. Yeah. Okay. Please stop me if I just start rambling and don't let others talk. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just drawing from my experience, I'll actually like encourage Neo to like completely ramble and like just drawing from my experience because it has helped me like shape my thoughts because I used to like conduct the session. So if somebody has like thoughts, please like feel free to interrupt. Like that, this is the approach
Feel
that I
free
had
to, yeah.
from my experience. That I feel more than comfortable and okay if somebody just interrupts me, it's like Shayan, I want to speak something. It's like that's like completely okay. And yeah, I've
Yeah.
been like
Talk
listening to
whatever
your
the fuck you want, right?
rants and I love them, Harsh. Like more power to you and go into that flow. Yeah.
Yeah. Living inside and not outside of yourself for better living. What? Living and not. Yeah, yeah, correct. I understand. Yeah. It's the internal external dichotomy. So, uh, Alok, Alok Bhai should definitely take a session on this someday. But yeah, just putting it out there. Okay. Yeah. So this is a bit of
I want to.
all progress is not good progress. So I don't consider myself as a conservative. As such, I am. I mean, I don't know. There is not a word to define me per se, but uh, I definitely don't really align. I'm non-partisan that way. I feel the progressivism of out has definitely derailed somewhere, right? It was cool till 1990s, but there were, I would say, still roots of what was going to happen. There were still roots, there were still signs. So I guess even that is bad, but our world has definitely derailed. So yeah, let's look into it. Okay. So far, we have looked in the transition of power across history and civilization. There is to derive the point home that bureaucracy have existed, but have gotten worse towards the up and coming emergent ruling classes. You could just feel that, right? With secret police and the degeneracy of the once powerful hybrid system taking the cake. With more surveillance tools and subversion of the institutional structures that held up humanity since its inception, the conversion of religion into political ideology. Okay, you might have friends, you definitely have lost friends. You, all of us, I'm 100% sure you all have lost some friends if you have ever discussed politics, or you have hampered some kind of relationship to some extent, platonic or something, to some extent, if you have discussed politics. Why? Because politics has become that important for people. It did not used to be that this way. People could exist, right? But due to the fall of traditional religions, right, in a lot of, especially the West, and even coming to India for the younger generations, political ideology are becoming, more entrenched there. So what it tells us that people cannot live in vacuum. People cannot live without it. They need something. So you can have traditional religions, or you can have something like new age politics. Culture into critical theory. This dabs more into the American and even the Indian psyche of critical theory, the very destructive and, I would say, frankly suicidal culture of giving up your own upon your own civilization. That's happening. Not caring about where the state is going, not caring where your life is going, being something like a need, not fulfilling the responsibilities ordained to you by the gods. Yeah. The education into propaganda. Oh, yeah, this we all know. Community into a lone individual. So I'm as individual as the next guy. I'm as often individualistic as the next guy, but we can all see our communities and our systems have degenerated to like a huge extent, right? You used to have people coming out together, being together out there, having fun, even as children. We have gotten older, the societies we live in, we simply do not see as many children as we used to. We simply don't, right? Mobiles have taken over, internet has taken over, and somewhat even the state, right? The state wants to move away from the community because the community is a threat to the state, right? The community can come together forward because there's a sense of unity, there's a sense of parallel power structure that can hamper the state, right? You have turned the economy into the game again. The whole, what I was talking about, the fiat shitcoiners thing, it's all a gambling thing now. The economy is fake, the jobs are fake, everything is fake. Emotional relationships into transactions. And if someone does not believe in this, the economy is a game part, the sentence I said, just remember, in 5 years, what you earn right now, right? If you consider that whatever work you have done is being measured in terms of the money that you're earning, the same work that you are doing right now will be worth less in 5 years, more than 50% in 5 years, next 5 years, right? You do the same work, you will earn 50% less, right? Which is crazy. Have led to serious social problems for all of us. Be it skyrocketing depression, loneliness crisis, people not being able to make ends meet, where money is no longer a means to end to something more in life, but rather the end itself. The conversion of human relationships into something purely transactional, shallow, rise of inceldom and gender and race wars and caste wars. all have become propped by the bureaucracy in the modern world to fulfill their needs to create the perfect consumer. One who doesn't question why do we need you? Why do we need bureaucracy? The void of any self authority, self integrity, nor community, race, religion, no friendships, nor love, nor otherwise. Because God forbid if you try to find happiness is anything other than this endless consumption. All this to make sure that the masses can never ever think of rising against the Big Brother, the maintenance of the neoliberal status quo, and yes, for us to just consume. This is awfully close to Friedrich Nietzsche's Last Man, characterized by a passive nihilism and a lack of higher aspirations, ultimately serving the interest of consumer-driven system that discourages critical examination of authority. Uh, there are a lot of developers in the chat, and I guess you might have noticed this. A very stark contrast between Bitcoiners and shitcoiners that I have seen. And please correct me if I'm wrong here. Basically, 90% of the applications that shitcoiners do make zero sense. Right? They have zero product viability per se, right? But they are doing it just for the sake of satiating their aspirations to consume, right? They want to get that next gambling round, they want to make that next shit meme coin, right? You come to Bitcoin, and as much as we give flakes to the maxis for being whatever, right, these people will work and will develop for Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin in Bitcoin, even if there is no money there tomorrow, right? That itself is how internet started, right? If you look at it, how the best things in the world came about, there was no monetary incentive to it. There was a ideologically and aspirational uh, dimension to it, which lacks today in a lot of places. You go in Web 2, in Bitshala, in a lot of Bitcoin communities, you would have a lot of ex fan guys, a lot of amazing people who have come from very amazing places, but they simply don't want to go to Web 2. They don't want to go to the corporate. They don't want to go to the, even the shitcoin world. Why so? Because you go there and you feel something is wrong. You cannot explain it, but something is off, right? So this is what this paragraph tries to touch upon. Okay. The only logical solution is to fight to take them back. The march towards institutions, to rekindle the fire of the spirit and not to run away from the problems. This is very prevalent among the American don't trend on me crowd who might fear government overreach and think moving away from the institutions of power, which are generally centered in cities, is the solution. It is not. Antithetically, when we lay down our weapons and tools, we make it easy for our abductors to abuse our rights. For example, California has some of the strictest gun laws in the nation, including mandatory waiting periods, background checks and restrictions on certain firearm types. Rural residents who often use firearms for hunting and personal protection have expressed that these laws impose unnecessary burdens and fail to consider the cultural significance of guns in the rural communities. So yeah, makes sense. Again, even in India, right? No one is asking you why the telecom is being introduced, even though it will affect us. No one is asking the tech community in Bangalore. No one is, right? We use Linux to not have the bloatware and the adware of Windows, right? And then the government introduces something like a telecom bill anyway, something like the income tax new bill anyway, which will have access to all your social medias, which they can curate and they can control how you put your own content out there, right? So we there is no option of running away from this. We should not run away, right? The Americans, the whole libertarian crowd, who ironically made the Declaration of Rights, by the way, right? All of the founding fathers, very hardcore libertarian guys, right? They made the American as it was, and these people ran away from the cities. They left their institutions, right? Yeah, we must not do that. We must not make the same mistake. In India, the middle class is similarly demarcated on several social, regional, religious, and cultural lines, hence holding no voting bloc of their own, a necessity in despotic third world countries, thus never driving change, driving nothing that benefits them. but only a form of progress that takes more and more from them. Similarly, aforementioned issues that take the precedence for the intellectual classes in India, because that's what garners the most attention and craze, drives the emotions, sets the narrative, and elects the government. Right? This is part of why I talk about uh, the violence. I touch on the violence, which is like a bit extreme to some people, but yeah, it drives emotion. When the farm laws were introduced, right, and then was a huge youth protest until the national flag was changed on the damn red fort. Most of the Indians supported these farmers, right? Even though from a capitalist sense of view and from a common sense point of view, the MSP laws did make sense, right? Even then. Why? Because emotions, the craze, the narrative, right? So, Bitcoiners, us, maybe 10, 20 years, we can definitely work towards that and set that what we want. It would be a long process, it won't be an easy thing, but we should definitely, uh, have that direction in mind. Yeah. If this has changed, the people have to capture the institutions first and foremost to kick out the parasitic class masquerading as public servants and change priorities, drive change. This endeavor is arduous and uphill battle, and but is paramount to end the reign of the false gods. This can only be achieved when we have the twofold strategy of the esoteric and the material. And I frankly think, most of the guys are very, very fixated on one of the other, not the both. Right? We need to integrate it. Both are important. The esoteric, people among us who are religious, who know religion, who are faithful, might recognize this more, right? The esoteric, driving change to fix the social problems of our time, leveraging traditions that did work for the inherent human conditions before being destroyed by power that be, right? So what it means is, the bureaucracy did destroy our individual lives, but it also took a lot of traditions and a lot of community which did work out on a lot of places, right? A good example, a very good example, right? Why the hell do you need bureaucratic sponsored uh, single motherhood, right? That happens in the US. What it used to happen, the community used to take care of such people, right? There was a system in place that was very non tangible, you could not measure it, but that was a system definitely. What you have done is you have made the state the husband, right? And you have introduced a, the state into a big chunk of the personal life of the couple, right? What's the need? What's the damn need, right? Then you have, but that does not like mean that all of the laws like are relating to bad, but per se it's like the overreach is insane. Number two, the material. Now, those among us who are developers, who are more, concerned with earthly conditions per se, they can see this, they can understand this. Driving change to fix the social problems of our time, leveraging technology in realms of economy, administration, and privacy protection. So, you guys, right? You guys know friends, you guys know family members, you guys know relatives who are pretty depressed, pretty at a bad place because of the social problems of our modern times. And there is no clear answer to it that you can give them. There is no band-aid, there is no nothing, right? And if you guys are observant, which I feel a lot of Bitcoiners are, right? You can understand this point. So yeah, I'll end with this because we have crossed the mark of 9 p.m. Among most of people who correctly identify these problems of our time, they generally hate technology for the role in it. Somewhat rightfully so. I must admit that as well. Even I do hate technology to some extent, but yeah. But as I explained, we have to be accelerationist in some extent of the word to have a shot at this. Just identifying the problem is not enough. We need progress, this time in the right direction.